Every chain they fastened around her coffin was meant to keep her from coming back, but what if they weren't holding her down, only holding her in place? The first footage flickers to life with the kind of hum that belongs to old tape, grainy, muffled, and washed in a color too pale to be natural. The frame opens on a line of bulldozers stalled in a field of mud, the kind of Kentucky earth that clings to boots and refuses to let go. A man's voice narrates, steady and weary. Asterisk. It was the morning of April 9th, 2023, when the construction halted. They said the ground wasn't right, kept sinking, like it was breathing. Asterisk. The camera pans to a shallow trench, now filled with standing water. Inside, half submerged and bound in iron chains, lies the outline of a coffin. Workers hover near it, faces blurred for privacy, but their posture tells enough. They don't want to be there. Someone in the background mutters, barely audible, asterisk. She's finally loose. Asterisk. The tape cuts to static. The journalist, unseen, speaks again, this time in the present. His voice has the tone of someone caught between skepticism and awe. Asterisk. I went to Carter County 2 weeks after the excavation. The local paper ran 3 lines about the incident, called it a containment anomaly. No mention of a coffin, no mention of the chains. Asterisk. A pause. The faint sound of cicadas. Asterisk. But everyone I spoke to remembered the smell. Asterisk. The first interview comes from a man identified only as Times James H. Asterisk, former equipment operator. The audio distorts slightly as he recalls the day. Asterisk. We hit something that wasn't supposed to be there. The dirt just caved in like it was swallowing air. Then I saw the chain, thick, rusted, looped around wood that shouldn't have still been wood. Asterisk. When asked why he didn't report it directly, James answers, asterisk. Because they told us not to. Said the county'd handle it. Asterisk. He laughs then, the nervous kind that trails into silence. Asterisk. Next day, all the machines were gone. Asterisk. The narrator describes visiting the site months later. The ground had been flattened, reseeded with wildgrass, no marker to show what had been unearthed. Yet the soil was uneven mounded, like something had been reburied in a hurry. He reads from his field notes, asterisk. The grass won't grow over the center, feels hollow underfoot, asterisk. An archival reel from 1956 shows the same field, long before the road. The image fades between frames of a wooden cross, long since rotted, and an elderly woman sweeping her porch. The voiceover continues, asterisk. The old maps call this area Crane Hollow. No church cemetery ever recorded here. No registry of graves. Still, locals remember the name Evelyn. They say she never rested right. Asterisk. The Carter County Courthouse sits like a mausoleum of paper, its hallways smell of mildew and dust, and every step echoes too long. The journalist's voice begins over footage of yellowed folders spread across a wooden table, the edges curled like burnt leaves. Asterisk. In June of 1911, a woman named Evelyn Crane was buried under state supervision after a closed inquest. Her case never made it to trial. There's no record of an execution, no medical cause of death, and yet her body was registered as property of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Asterisk. The voice lingers on the last phrase, uneasy, as the screen cuts to the words scrawled across an aged page. Asterisk, deceased. Containment approved. Asterisk. The camera zooms in on the ledger itself, the so-called White Ledger of Carter County. It was meant for births and deaths, but between 1909 and 1913, a separate column appeared. It reads, simply, asterisk, interference, asterisk. The entries are sparse, only 3 names, and Evelyn's is the last. The documentary narrator explains that local historians call it white, not for its color, but because everything in it was meant to stay erased. The footage pauses on her entry written in a different hand. the ink darker, as though pressed harder than the rest. Asterisk, witchcraft and corpse interference. Asterisk, the narrator recites from the page, his tone factual but disbelieving. Asterisk. No statute by that name existed in 1911. It was a phrase borrowed from Old British common law, outlawed a century earlier. Asterisk. The implication hangs there, cold. Then comes the sound of old typewriter keys, an archival reconstruction of her file being filled. Each click feels like a nail being driven in. A surviving affidavit from the town doctor, Milo Hart, claims Evelyn had been found in a private ceremony involving the remains of an infant. His statement reads, the woman did speak to it as though it were breathing. She refused to surrender the body, saying the child was only sleeping between worlds. Another affidavit, unsigned, contradicts the first entirely, insisting she had been a midwife performing last rites. The contradictions mount like evidence in a trial that never happened. Photographs from the period show a gaunt woman with dark eyes seated in front of a clapboard house. The image is cracked, but her face half-shadowed seems too aware of the lens. The journalist lowers his voice. I ran her name through every census, every burial registry, and every parish list from 1,900 to 1,920. Evelyn Crane appears, disappears, then appears again, as if the records were rewritten. He flips to the back of the file. The final page is blank except for a faint stamp. Filed, no cause of death. Beneath it, a different handwriting, shaky, hurried, adds one line in pencil. Do not exhume. The camera holds on that phrase. Outside, thunder rolls softly, the sound almost like soil being shifted. The narrator ends the segment with a whisper, half to himself. They didn't bury her for what she did. They buried her for what they feared she could still do. The tape begins with the sound of wind through cattails and the distant barking of dogs. Then a woman's voice, brittle with age, trembles out of the static. She wasn't evil, not the way they said. Evelyn just knew things a body shouldn't. Her name is Martha Adkins 93, born 2 ridges over from what used to be Crane Hollow. The footage captures her porch, rusted tin roof, a chain of blue glass bottles hanging to keep away haints. Her eyes flick to the camera only once, and she keeps her hands wrapped around a chipped teacup as though holding on to warmth that isn't there. The journalist narrates softly, his voice like a late-night broadcast meant not to wake the house. In Carter County, the midwife was once as necessary as the preacher. She delivered life and, when needed, carried the dead to rest. Evelyn Crane did both. According to records and whispered memory, Evelyn had brought nearly 40 children into the world, and yet it was what she did when one didn't survive that marked her as cursed. Another interview plays Harold Benton 82, the grandson of one of Evelyn's clients. They said she'd hold the baby up to her lips and breathe into its mouth 3 times. Real soft, like she was giving it back what the Lord took. He pauses, and the chair creaks. Then she'd whisper something, just a few words nobody could catch. Folks started calling it the stillborn prayer. The documentary cuts to an old photograph of a baby's grave, the marker carved with no name, just a small circle crossed through the center. The journalist explains that similar symbols were found across multiple burial plots in the hollow marks believed to bind spirits so they don't wander. The folklore experts interviewed later in the sequence can't agree whether the pace is adult, with folklore experts interviewed later in the sequence can't agree. Symbols were meant to protect or imprison. An excerpt from the diary of Reverend Silas Dobb, dated 1910, appears on screen. Asterisk. She claims to speak for the motherless, says the little ones answer her from the soil. Warned me that some were not yet asleep. Asterisk. The ink trails downward, blotched by water or tears. As the narration deepens, the tone becomes confessional. The journalist admits that while filming, one of the locals led him to the last known cabin. Evelyn used a skeleton of wood, standing in a gully overrun with vines. Inside, on a beam above the hearth, were etchings too small to be decoration. Dozens of circles crossed through, burned into the grain. Asterisk. I tried to count them. Asterisk, he says. Asterisk. But each time I did, the number changed. Asterisk. The old woman's voice returns at the end of the tape, quieter now, as though she's speaking through years of fear. Asterisk. She didn't talk to the dead, mister. She listened. That's worse. Asterisk. The tape clicks off, leaving only the sound of the wind again, steady, patient, and alive. The river runs thin in the summer of 1923, its bones showing through the clay. The little Sandy had never gone so low in living memory, and what it left behind should have stayed buried. The documentary opens with black and white photographs, cracked riverbeds, cattails curled to paper, men standing knee-deep in a trickle that used to be a current. The narrator speaks over the images, his tone clinical at first, like someone cataloging evidence. Asterisk. When the water retreated, it revealed objects that should not have endured the years: leather shoes, small enough for infants, arranged in pairs along the riverbank. Beside them, twisted nails rusted through, and bound with strands of hair. The sheriff's office filed the discovery as possible ritual refuse. The county called it folklore. The people called it her calling card. Asterisk. Audio from an interview crackles in. Asterisk asterisk Thomas Lee. Asterisk asterisk, grandson of one of the men who found the site. His voice is the kind that has lived through tobacco and silence. Asterisk. It wasn't just junk. You could tell someone meant it to be there. The shoes were all pointed toward the water, and every one of them was clean. No mud, no silt, just waiting. Asterisk. He pauses before adding, almost apologetic, asterisk. Granddad said the dogs wouldn't drink from that stretch for a year after. The journalist describes walking the same bank a century later. The river is fuller now, yet the current hums like it's speaking under its breath. He recounts how local folklore insists the little Sandy was the boundary Evelyn Crane could not cross in life, a spiritual wall. They say that when the drought came, the boundary cracked, and her whispers seeped through. The county archive backs none of it, but one ledger lists an anonymous complaint from 1924, asterisk, night sounds of weeping from riverbed, request county inspection, asterisk, no record of any inspection exists. Footage cuts to a shelf of preserved evidence bags from the state archives, each tagged with a case number faded to near invisibility. Inside one, a clump of something dark and brittle, the catalog label reads simply asterisk, organic material, human origin uncertain. Asterisk. Another contains a charm made from bird bones and twine, resembling a small figure with bound arms. The narrator's voice lowers, asterisk. These were entered into storage under a category that no longer exists. Occult forensic. Asterisk. Folklorist asterisk asterisk. Dr. Helen Carter asterisk asterisk, interviewed beneath the hum of fluorescent lights, explains that in Appalachian superstition, water is both a grave and a passage. Asterisk. If you trap something evil in running water, it can't come back. But if the river dries well, then you've just opened a door. Asterisk. The closing sound is the river itself, recorded at night. The microphone captures the flow, slow and deliberate, with the faint rhythm of something tapping beneath it like fingers drumming on a coffin lid underwater. The narrator ends quietly, almost reverently, asterisk. Maybe she's not coming back through the water. Maybe she never left it. Asterisk. The courthouse clock struck midnight when they dug her the first time. It was early autumn, 1911, the air too heavy for digging. the kind of night where the moon looked like it was watching. The narrator's voice opens the sequence with that detail, the tone clipped, clinical, yet trembling beneath the calm. Asterisk. The official record notes a single exhumation order for the body of Evelyn Crane, signed by Sheriff Abner Holt. But witnesses claimed two. One documented, one denied. Asterisk. The footage shows a scanned page from the county burial registry. The ink faded into rust-colored lines. There's a margin note beside Evelyn's name, asterisk, re-entry confirmed. Containment incomplete. Asterisk. The narrator reads the line twice, as if unsure it's real. Asterisk. No other entry in the ledger uses the word containment. Only hers. Asterisk. An interview begins with asterisk, asterisk, Mary Holt, asterisk, asterisk, distant granddaughter of the sheriff, her face turned from the camera, her voice is faint, filmed through a haze of cigarette smoke. Asterisk. My granddaddy said she wasn't dead the first time they put her in. That's what kept him awake. He said she knocked. Asterisk. When asked to clarify, she refuses to continue. The tape ends abruptly, replaced by the metallic sound of film flapping against a reel. The journalist explains that according to local lore, Holt ordered Evelyn's coffin dug up only 3 nights after her burial. Rumors claimed her grave had sunk a foot overnight, and the soil, when touched, was warm. The men who performed the exhumation, 3 laborers from Olive Hill, never signed their payslips. Their names vanish from county records a week later. But a fragment of an old newspaper survives. Asterisk. Sheriff oversees relocation of remains due to improper burial conditions. Asterisk. Beneath it, in smaller print. Asterisk. Witnesses discouraged from public comment. Asterisk. The second exhumation, the one unrecorded, supposedly occurred 6 days later. A letter found in the Holt family Bible reads, asterisk, we moved her to the ridge. I ordered the coffin sealed and the chain drawn tight. May the Lord forgive us for what the dirt can't hold. Asterisk. The handwriting slants downward as if written in haste. Forensic examination of the paper dates it to the 1,910 seconds. The documentary tone grows colder here, the voiceover stripped of sympathy. Asterisk. Chain links of iron, gauge 16. Estimated 6 meters used to wrap coffin perimeter. Secured with 2 padlocks and a cross of rebar. Burial location redacted from county survey. Asterisk. The camera pans over an old map, portions blacked out with ink. The narrator continues, asterisk. Records suggest that Holt's final act as sheriff was to ensure her resting place would not be found. Yet in doing so, he gave her legend a pulse that hasn't stopped beating. Asterisk. Rain begins to fall on the recording, gentle at first, then harder, like gravel on wood. The journalist's voice softens, almost regretful. Asterisk. No one knows who ordered the second burial, but someone did, and someone watched. Because the following morning, a report was filed. Grave secured, chain intact, soil moving. Asterisk. The tape hums into silence. The sound engineer breathes into the microphone as if testing to see if the story's over. It isn't. The tape opens with a hollow pop, then the low hum of rain against tin. A man's voice enters thin, strained by time. The drawl of Carter County etched into every syllable. Asterisk. We prayed the chains would hold. Asterisk, he says. The screen fades from black to a dimly lit church. Mount Olive, its white paint flaked to gray. The steeple leaning like it's tired of pointing upward. The journalist's narration drifts over the scene. Asterisk. Reverend Amos Dillard was only 26 when he led the congregation of Mount Olive in what they called binding prayers. It was September 1911. 3 days after Sheriff Holt ordered Evelyn Crane's second burial. The town was certain she wasn't finished. Asterisk. The footage cuts to the Reverend's surviving sermon notes, scraps of lined paper tucked into a hymnal, the words faded but legible under ultraviolet light. One line repeats 3 times. Asterisk. Where the flesh fails, bind the spirit. Asterisk. The narrator pauses between readings, voice tightening. Asterisk. Binding prayers were a fusion of faith and folklore, a ritual older than the church itself, meant to seal what the ground could not. Asterisk. An archived audio segment follows, recorded decades later in 1954. Reverend Dillard, now an old man, speaks into a static-laced recorder. Asterisk. We formed a ring, hand to hand, and sang until the wind turned. I remember thinking it wasn't God we were keeping out, but something else we were trying to keep in. Asterisk. There's a thunderclap mid-sentence, as if the past interrupts him. The hum of the tape warps, then recovers, like the memory itself resists being replayed. The journalist describes standing in the same graveyard, a century later. The stones are lopsided, the air heavy with honeysuckle and damp iron. Beneath his feet, the soil feels thin, unsettled. Asterisk. Locals say if you hum the last line of a hymn near her grave, the wind stops for a breath. Asterisk, he says, his voice just above a whisper. Asterisk. They still call that spot the binding ground. Asterisk. A surviving witness from the 1,930 seconds, a woman named Lottie Presson once told her grandson that the night of the binding, the congregation didn't sing in unison. Asterisk. It was like something beneath them was answering. Asterisk, she said. Asterisk. You could hear it in the pauses, 3 beats behind every amen. Asterisk. In one fragment of surviving film, the church choir stands outside in lantern light, faces blurred by exposure, their mouths open in prayer. The audio overlay is a sermon Dillard gave years later. Asterisk. We chained her because we feared her. We prayed because we feared ourselves. Asterisk. Thunder rolls again, this time too perfectly in sync with the words, as if the storm knows its cue. The final shot lingers on the church cross, warped and darkened with rust. The narrator closes the segment in a tone stripped of faith, only reverence for what endures. Asterisk. The Bible they used that night is still kept in a glass case inside Mount Olive. The spine split clean down the middle, as if even the word couldn't bear the weight of what they were binding. Asterisk. The attic smelled of paper and mice when they found the box. Dust rose in slow spirals, caught in the single bar of sunlight that pierced the roof. Inside, stacked between old hymnals and yellowed newspapers, was a cardboard shoebox wrapped in twine. A tag on top read asterisk, Mount Olive, Private Archive. Asterisk. The journalist's voice, calm and steady, narrates over the shot of gloved hands lifting the lid. Asterisk. Inside were 6 cassette tapes, unmarked except for one, a label written in a heavy, uneven hand. Holt, Coffin Incident, 1972. Asterisk. The footage cuts to the sound engineer threading the tape into an old player, its plastic yellowed with age. When the button clicks down, a low hum fills the room, then the faint rasp of wind through trees. A man's voice breaks through the static, older, deliberate. Asterisk. This is Sheriff Thomas Holt, recording for county documentation, October 17, 1972. Site: unregistered grave north of Little Sandy. Purpose: confirm condition of chains. Asterisk. A pause follows. The tape hisses, then catches again. Someone in the background murmurs a prayer. Holt's voice grows uneasy. Asterisk. We've dug about 2 feet and reached metal. Chains appear rusted but intact, opening the coffin for confirmation. Asterisk. The scrape of a shovel, a clank, then something softer, wood cracking, a slow exhale-like breath where there shouldn't be any. The prayer grows louder, joined by 2 more voices, trembling. The sound distorts, peaking too high for the recorder to process. Then, a scream short, human, abruptly cut off. The tape runs another 30 seconds in silence, except for the whir of the reels. Then comes a faint tapping, rhythmic, hollow. The journalist's narration overlays it, his tone no longer confident. Asterisk. Audio specialists confirm the tapping is real, not mechanical. 3 beats, a pause, then 3 again, the same pattern described in Reverend Dillard's account of the binding prayers. Asterisk. When the tape stops, the camera lingers on the machine, its reels slowing to a stop like the last turn of a clock. The journalist continues. Asterisk. Sheriff Thomas Holt filed no report after that night. He resigned 2 weeks later and moved to Tennessee. When interviewed in 1989, he refused to discuss the tape, saying only, "The dead don't stay buried if you talk about them." Asterisk. A photograph appears on screen. Holt, standing beside a patrol car, his expression hollow. The film grain makes his eyes look darker than they probably were. Behind him, in the blurred tree line, the camera catches something pale, almost human-shaped, but too distant to identify. The final section of the recording plays once more. The static swells, the voices blur into noise, and then so faint the microphone barely catches it, a woman's voice whispers, asterisk, "Retie me," asterisk. The tape ends with a sharp click, followed by the sound of rain hammering on the attic roof. The narrator exhales, the first sign of breath breaking through the formality. Asterisk. We found the tape sealed in a church box, not a police file. Maybe the county wanted it hidden. Maybe someone wanted it kept. Asterisk. The silence that follows feels alive, stretching too long, until the last frame fades to black. It was June of 1978 when Carter Ridge swallowed 3 men whole. The mines had been shut down for years by then, their mouths sealed with rotted planks and government warnings, but men in Carter County didn't always listen to what was written on paper. The documentary opens with archival footage of a sheriff's cruiser parked in the Ridge Hollow, its red light spinning soundlessly in the dusk. The journalist's voice enters soft, even, the kind used when describing something that still feels half unsolved. Asterisk, the hollow men of Carter Ridge. Asterisk, he says. Asterisk. 3 miners, Wayne Rudd, Elmer Jackson, and Thomas Lee Jr. vanished on June 23, 1978, while conducting an unauthorized survey near the old Crane burial site. What searchers found instead were their helmets, upright and still burning. Asterisk. The camera lingers on a grainy photograph. 3 white miners' helmets glowing faintly in the dark, arranged in a triangle. A deputy stands behind them, his hand half covering his mouth. Beneath the photo, an evidence tag dated the 25th of June 1978 simply reads asterisk, objects recovered at Ridgemouth. No trace of remains. Asterisk. The narration continues, asterisk. Their families claimed they were looking for copper veins. The county said they were grave robbers. The truth, like everything else up there, stayed buried. Asterisk. An audio clip follows an interview recorded in 1993 with a former volunteer searcher named asterisk asterisk Ray Bolton asterisk asterisk. His voice is dry, rasping. Asterisk. We found the helmets first. The lights were still on, like they were waiting for somebody to pick them back up. But the ground underneath, it wasn't right. It was soft, like it had been turned. Only there weren't no shovels, no tracks, nothing. Asterisk. The tape crackles with his heavy breathing before he adds, asterisk. And there was this smell like the inside of a well, cold and deep. Asterisk. County records show that the search stretched 6 days, then was quietly ended without explanation. When the journalist visits the ridge, the vegetation has overrun everything. Briars twist around broken fence posts. The earth dips unnaturally in spots, forming hollows too precise to be natural. He crouches to film the ground where the helmets were said to rest, pressing the microphone against the soil. On playback, there's a faint sound beneath the wind, metal on metal, slow and distant, like links shifting. In a later segment, the documentary overlays that sound with an image of the chain once wrapped around Evelyn Crane's coffin. The comparison is uncanny, the rhythm nearly identical to the one captured on the 1000 972 Holt tape. The narrator's voice lowers, stripped of its measured neutrality. Asterisk. If the chain was meant to hold her, maybe the ridge is what she left behind, a piece of that binding that never stopped moving. Asterisk. Locals refused to speak on record, but one anonymous letter mailed to the journalist reads, asterisk, they weren't the first men the ridge took. It just remembers who trespasses. Asterisk. The handwriting is jagged, the envelope stained with something darker than dirt. The camera fades to black as the wind rises over the ridge, the sound almost human, a low hum circling the trees. The narrator breaks the silence one last time, his words faint, uncertain. Asterisk. The helmets still burn in the archive's photographs. Their lights never went out. Maybe they're still waiting for someone to finish the digging. Asterisk. The Bible was found in 1991 during an inventory of the Carter County Storage Vault, a forgotten annex beneath the courthouse where old evidence went to rot. The footage begins with the sound of a lock being undone, metal squealing as the door opens onto rows of decaying boxes. The journalist's flashlight pans across the labels. Asterisk Holt, A burial site, asterisk asterisk Mount Olive Archive, asterisk and then, near the bottom, asterisk unassigned, divided by religious materials. Asterisk inside, wrapped in wax paper darkened by age, lay a torn Bible. Its leather binding had split, and half the pages were missing or fused together. When they peeled it open, they found the writing. The camera zooms close to the brittle paper, the words thick and uneven, seeping through to the next page. Asterisk. My womb is not yours to bury. Asterisk. The ink had dried to a dark brown, the color of blood steeped in time. The forensic report, dated November 1991, lists it as asterisk biological origin, undetermined possible animal. Asterisk. Yet under magnification, the strokes revealed fingerprints, faint and feminine, pressed along the edges of the phrase. The narrator's voice is low, reverent, almost afraid to break the hush around the discovery. Asterisk. Whoever wrote it wanted the words to bleed through. They wanted it to stain. Asterisk. County archives trace the Bible's serial number to a shipment made in 1907 to the Mount Olive congregation, which at the time was pastored by Reverend Silas Dobb, the same man who testified against Evelyn Crane. The handwriting, according to forensic comparison, matches several of Dobb's sermon notes. But the phrase, the raw defiance of it, reads nothing like a preacher's hand. The narrator lingers on this contradiction. Asterisk. Maybe she wrote it herself. Asterisk, he says. Asterisk. Maybe he took her words and made them his penance. Asterisk. In an interview recorded years later, historian Dr. May Ellis explains that in early Appalachian custom, a midwife's tools were often buried with her, a symbolic sealing of her power. But for Evelyn, it was different. They buried her body as they would an object of control. Asterisk. They weren't putting her to rest. Asterisk, Ellis says. Asterisk. They were putting her away. Asterisk. The film cuts to a slow pan of the Bible's open pages under ultraviolet light. The stained phrase glows faintly, and behind it, faint indentations appear writing on the page before it that had long been torn out. Forensic imaging captures partial words. Asterisk forgive, asterisk and asterisk return. Asterisk, the narrator exhales audibly before speaking again. Asterisk, it's easy to make monsters out of women who won't stay quiet. Asterisk, he says. Asterisk, maybe Evelyn wasn't the curse Carter County feared. Maybe she was what they created by trying to silence her. Asterisk. The final seconds of the segment play the ambient recording taken from the vault itself, a low hum, indistinct but rhythmic, echoing between the shelves. The sound engineer swears it wasn't there when they filmed. The journalist doesn't confirm or deny it. The camera closes on the Bible one last time, The phrase, filling the frame, the ink almost wet under the light. Then, just before the screen cuts to black, a single drop of water falls onto the page from somewhere unseen above, spreading the old words back into motion. The footage begins with a slow, aerial shot of Carter County, Kentucky fields patchworked with mist, hills folding into one another like old hands at prayer. The journalist's voice comes in softly, layered over the hum of static, the tone both investigative and uncertain. Asterisk, no map of this land has ever stayed the same. But it isn't the roads or rivers that move. It's the grave. Asterisk. The drone camera banks toward a hollow at the edge of the little sandy river, where a faint clearing sits surrounded by sycamores. According to county records, this is where Evelyn Crane was last buried in 1911. But when the team arrives, there is nothing. No stone, no mound, just soil that dips slightly, like a breath half taken. The narrator describes how surveyors in 1948, 1967, and again in 1982 marked Evelyn's burial site in different locations, each one nearly 100 yards apart. No coordinates match. Old photographs show a crude cross leaning at an angle. In later shots, that same cross appears beside a different tree line altogether. Asterisk. It's like the ground rearranges itself when no one's watching. Asterisk, one local says in a recorded interview, his voice breaking through with the faint hiss of tape. Asterisk. We tried to mark it once with white stones. Next spring, the stones were gone, and there was grass where we swore we'd dug. Asterisk. A county engineer, Paul Merrick, appears on camera flipping through satellite overlays. He points out discrepancies between imagery from 2005 and 2023. The patch of earth believed to be Evelyn's grave seems to shift northeast, closer toward Carter Ridge. Asterisk. It's a data error. Asterisk, he says, though the words sound more like a plea than an explanation. Asterisk. But every correction pulls it further downhill. Asterisk. When asked if that's possible, he doesn't answer. The documentary shows side-by-side comparisons of archival photos, the same wooden fence appearing in different decades, each time at a slightly new angle, as if turning to face something unseen. The voiceover continues, asterisk. The older residents call it the restless plot. They say the ridge won't hold her, that it keeps spitting her back out, inch by inch. At night, the team sets up motion-sensitive cameras around the supposed burial perimeter. The footage shows nothing unusual until 3:11 a.m., when the frame distorts. The ground seems to shimmer for half a second, grass bending in a slow, circular pulse before everything snaps back into place. No sound, no wind, just the camera whirring. The data log marks a magnetic anomaly lasting 12 seconds. The next morning, one of the cameras is found 10 feet from where it had been staked, half buried. The lens faces downward into a patch of soil that looks freshly turned. The journalist kneels, pressing a hand against it, and the earth gives slightly, soft as breath. He says in voiceover, asterisk, it's like the ground remembers her better than we do. Asterisk. The segment closes with a sequence of overlaid images, maps, photographs, and sketches all fading into one another until they blur into a single unrecognizable terrain. The final frame lingers on an inscription once carved into a fence post near Mount Olive. Asterisk. She moves with the dirt that bound her. Asterisk. The letters are almost erased by time, but still legible enough to feel like a warning. The screen fades to black as the wind rises, carrying the faint rattle of chain links beneath the sound of cicadas. The screen opens on an interview filmed in the early 1990 seconds. The camera is slightly out of focus, the light too dim to reveal the full face of the man sitting in the folding chair. He is introduced only as Martin Hale, the sole surviving member of the 1978 mining survey, the one that ended with 3 men gone and nothing left but their helmets. His hands tremble as he adjusts his cap, and the microphone catches the dry scrape of his throat. The journalist's voice, even and deliberate, breaks the silence. Asterisk. Mr. Hale, you said you saw something before you ran from Carter Ridge. Asterisk. The man nods, slow, as if afraid of remembering. Asterisk. She was just standing there. Asterisk, he whispers. Asterisk. A little girl. Couldn't have been more than 8 or 9, but her eyes. Her eyes weren't right. Asterisk. The tape flickers as though reacting to his words. Hale leans closer to the lens, his face cut into bands of shadow by the single overhead bulb. Asterisk. I thought she was lost. Asterisk, he says. Asterisk. So I called out to her. Asked if she was hurt. She turned her head like she was hearing something behind her, then started to hum. Asterisk. He pauses long enough that the audio engineer has to check if the tape's still running. Asterisk. It wasn't no song I knew. Sounded like one of them church hymns, but backwards, like someone rewinding a record slow enough to make out the words. Asterisk. The documentary cuts to the journalist standing at the ridge where the miners vanished. The trees sway, and the faint sound of something like a melody rises on the wind. It's unrecognizable, just a broken rhythm of tones and breaths, but it feels deliberate. The narrator explains that search logs from the 1978 investigation include an unusual note written by the sheriff's deputy. Asterisk. Auditory hallucinations reported by witness claim of child singing on site. Asterisk. The report was later amended to remove that line. Hale's interview continues. Asterisk. She wasn't standing on the ground anymore when I looked again. Not floating, just lifted somehow, like the dirt wouldn't take her weight. Then she opened her mouth. Asterisk. The rest of his words falter. He looks off camera and asks for water. When the tape resumes, he finishes quietly. Asterisk. There was something moving in her throat. Not a sound, not air, just moving. Asterisk. The forensic psychologist interviewed afterward attributes his account to trauma, but the journalist interjects in narration. Asterisk. No one could explain why Hale's boots were found half a mile from the site, filled with water, though it hadn't rained in weeks. In the final sequence, the documentary overlays Hale's voice with modern nighttime footage of Carter Ridge. The camera pans through the tree line, the wind sharp and restless. At 3:09 a.m., a faint hum seeps into the recording, soft, childlike, undeniably patterned. When slowed, the sound forms the melody of asterisk, shall we gather at the river, asterisk, but reversed. The journalist's voice enters, barely above a whisper. Asterisk. He called her the black-eyed child, but no records show any missing girl that year. Maybe she wasn't a person at all. Maybe the ridge was just trying to remember what Evelyn left behind. Asterisk. The camera holds steady on the dark line of trees. 2 faint lights flicker in the distance, close together, too low to be stars. The hum grows louder, then cuts off mid-breath. The tape clicks, and for a moment, it sounds like someone laughing through the static before the screen fades to black. The footage begins with the sound of boots scraping over gravel and the steady hiss of a microphone picking up wind. The camera light sweeps across a limestone outcrop on the north face of Carter Ridge, illuminating carvings etched deep into the rock. Some are crosses, crude and uneven, while others spiral outward in looping shapes that look like eyes or suns. The journalist's voice, low and deliberate, cuts through the hum. Asterisk. In 2019, a team of researchers from Eastern Kentucky University documented over 40 distinct carvings spread across a half-mile stretch of limestone bordering the Crane burial site. What they found suggests the chain that bound Evelyn Crane's coffin wasn't the only form of restraint. The camera zooms close to one of the carvings, tracing a symbol that begins as a cross, but twists at the base into a circle, half blessing, half warning. The team measures the cuts with gloved hands, their flashlights trembling against the stone. Asterisk. These markings, asterisk, the narrator continues, asterisk, blend Christian iconography with Appalachian hex marks, the kind used to protect barns and homes from curses. But here, they face inward, toward the hollow. Asterisk. An interview follows with Dr. Lillian Morse a folklore professor whose voice carries the weight of someone who's read too much and slept too little. She sits before a projector casting images of the symbols across the wall behind her. Asterisk. What's extraordinary, she says, isn't that the community used both faiths, it's that they merged them. This isn't protection, it's tethering. They didn't chain her coffin to trap her. They chained the world to her. Asterisk. She explains that in Appalachian superstition, certain shapes, spirals, knots, and interlocked rings weren't meant to imprison spirits but to bind the living and the dead in shared space. To sever one meant unbalancing the other. The journalist reads from a field note recovered from the 1911 Mount Olive Congregation archives, the handwriting barely legible. Asterisk. The stone remembers what the earth forgets. Asterisk. Beneath it, a crude sketch of the same symbols appears, drawn in what looks like charcoal. The paper edges are singed. Asterisk. Whoever carved them, the narrator says, understood that words fade, but stone keeps its promises. Asterisk. At dusk, the documentary team records the limestone wall again. The carvings catch the last of the sunlight, glowing faintly orange before disappearing into shadow. But when infrared footage is played back, faint lines appear between the symbols, thin grooves linking them like a chain, encircling the ridge. Dr. Morse returns in voiceover, her tone almost reverent. Asterisk. You have to understand, binding isn't about keeping something in place. It's about acknowledgement. Once you mark it, you admit it exists. Asterisk. The final shot drifts slowly over the limestone, the carvings vanishing into black. The camera microphone catches the sound of distant thunder, echoing off the ridge. Then, faintly, barely audible beneath the wind comes the rattle of something metallic shifting in the dirt below, like links tightening after too long left slack. The journalist whispers into his recorder, the stones are breathing again. The screen cuts to static. It started with the sound of metal breaking. The documentary begins with a wide shot of a construction site carved into the side of Carter Ridge, floodlights cutting through the gray dawn. The crew had been clearing ground for a new access road when a backhoe struck something buried beneath the shale. The audio from the footage carries the sharp groan of steel bending, followed by the hollow echo of chains snapping. The operator curses, kills the engine, and everything goes quiet except for the sound of wind moving through the trees. The narrator's voice enters, steady but uneasy. On April 2, 2022, a construction crew working near the old burial corridor reported damaging what appeared to be a section of iron restraints embedded in the soil. Within 72 hours, the ridge changed. The footage cuts to phone video captured by one of the workers, a length of corroded chain dangling from a slab of limestone. The links snapped clean. A voice behind the camera mutters, looks like it's been here 100 years, and another answers, then maybe it should have stayed there. The frame shakes, and the clip ends with the sound of something heavy sliding underground. The next segment plays audio from a county emergency call dated April 5th. A woman's voice trembles as she says, something's killing the deer, not eating them, just opening them up. The dispatcher asks for her location, and she stammers, near the ridge, near where they dug. The journalist overlays his narration. Colder now, more procedural. Over the next 9 days, 12 incidents of animal mutilation were reported within a 5-mile radius of Carter Ridge. No tracks, no predators identified. The carcasses were found facing east, eyes open. At the same time, cell towers along the ridge began dropping signal every night between 2 and 3 a.m. Technicians blamed atmospheric interference, though the shutdowns occurred in clear weather and at exact intervals. Audio recorded during the outages captures only static, and, faintly beneath it, what sounds like breaths slow, measured, almost human. The documentary cuts to a local farmer, Caleb Rowan, sitting on his porch as dusk falls. He speaks without looking at the camera. Asterisk. It ain't quiet out here no more. Asterisk, he says. Asterisk. It's worse. The silence feels full, like the air's holding its breath. Asterisk. The microphone picks up the faint rustle of grass behind him, though there's no wind. When asked if he's gone back to the ridge, he shakes his head. Asterisk. Once the chain broke, you could feel it in your teeth. Ground went light, like it wasn't under you right. Asterisk. Night footage shows the ridge under infrared. At 2:14 a.m., the screen distorts. The sound cuts out completely, replaced by a low-frequency pulse that registers more in the chest than the ear. The narrator speaks over the silence. Asterisk. The county sealed the construction site the next morning. No official statement was issued, no press release. But one internal memo, obtained through public record, reads simply: Containment compromised. Advise non-interference until further notice. Asterisk. The final image lingers on a single broken link half buried in dirt. As the camera closes in, the metal trembles slightly, as if catching some vibration too low to hear. The journalist's voice fades in one last time, barely audible. Asterisk. When the chain broke, it didn't just free her. It reminded the ground she was still there. Asterisk. The sound fades, and for a long moment, the film holds nothing but silence, the kind that feels alive. The image flickers before it resolves static, washed-out colors, the familiar hum of old VHS tape beginning to play. The frame stabilizes on a local news broadcast from Carter County Channel 7, dated July 1996. A cheerful meteorologist gestures at a map of Kentucky, his voice soft with static, saying something about light rain over the ridge. Behind him, barely visible through the snow of low-resolution tape, stands a woman. She doesn't move. She doesn't blink. Her figure wavers like a shadow cast against another layer of film. When the meteorologist turns, she's gone. The tape cuts to static. The journalist narrates, his tone quieter now, more measured. Asterisk. In 2021, a local archivist digitizing Channel 7's old broadcasts noticed something strange. The same weather segment appeared in 5 different reels, each labeled with a separate date. Every copy, every transfer, every master tape contained the same 30-second intrusion. A female figure behind the forecast screen, indistinct but human-shaped. Asterisk. The footage replays the moment in slow motion. The woman's outline sharpens dark dress, long hair, eyes that seem to catch the camera even through the grain. The journalist continues. Asterisk. Technicians confirmed it wasn't a reflection or overlay. The figure is embedded in the original analog signal. Asterisk. When the film cuts to a modern control room, an engineer named Sam Reynolds sits surrounded by humming monitors. He rewinds the broadcast repeatedly, his hand trembling over the jog wheel. Asterisk. Watch her face. Asterisk, he says, pointing at the screen. Asterisk. It's not just standing still. It's out of sync, like she's one frame behind the rest of the world. Asterisk. He zooms in. The image degrades further, dissolving into noise. Through the distortion, a faint sound emerges low, rhythmic, like the flick of a chain brushing concrete. The narrator explains that, beginning in late 2020, the same 1996 broadcast began reappearing on public access airwaves at 3:12 a.m. every night. Not streamed, not uploaded times broadcast. Asterisk. FCC records show no active transmitter in Carter County at that frequency. Local viewers reported televisions turning on by themselves, always to the same frozen frame. The meteorologist mid-sentence, and the woman behind him, her gaze directed straight into the lens. Asterisk. Who's rebroadcasting her? Asterisk, the journalist asks, the question hanging in static. A county technician interviewed off-camera admits to tracking the rogue signal to a tower near Carter Ridge, the same one that lost power after the chain break in 2022. The equipment there hasn't operated in years. When investigators visited, they found the monitors powered on, showing only snow. Yet one feed unconnected to any known source looped the weather segment endlessly. The film shows footage from that tower room. The air crackles with interference. Every few seconds, the static flickers into the outline of the woman again, each time closer, clearer, as though stepping forward through the noise. The journalist's voice lowers. Asterisk. If the ground remembers her, maybe the air does too. Maybe she's not returning through soil or water, but through signal through the quiet between the channels. Asterisk. The final scene plays the recording one last time. The meteorologist smiles, gestures toward the ridge, and the figure flickers behind him. Her lips move, barely perceptible, but when slowed to 1/4 speed, the words form something unmistakable. Asterisk, retie me. Asterisk. The screen collapses into white noise. The time code freezes at 3 hours 12 minutes and 44 seconds AM. Then, for a fraction of a second, the static clears and her face fills the frame. Eyes black, unblinking. The tape ends in silence so dense it feels like breath held inside the machine. The footage begins with a photograph. A man in a white coat standing beside a coroner's van, his name embroidered neatly over the pocket, *** Dr. Lewis Crane, ***. The journalist's voice is unsteady, no longer the detached calm of earlier chapters. On September 14, 2023, Dr. Lewis Crane, the Carter County coroner, assigned to verify the contents of the unearthed coffin, disappeared from his home. His car was found in the driveway, his phone left charging on the kitchen counter. The lights were on. The television was tuned to static. The documentary flashes back to 2 weeks before his disappearance, when footage from the excavation shows Dr. Crane kneeling beside the open coffin, his gloved hands hovering over rusted links of chain. The coffin's lid has been split and resealed with metal braces. The interior is empty except for soil, a few bones, and what looks like strands of hair clinging to the wood. A field microphone catches him muttering to the assistant beside him, I think this isn't the original burial. This looks recent. The recording cuts out as thunder rolls overhead. The narrator continues, his voice low and uneven. Dr. Crane filed one report, incomplete. It contained no autopsy notes, no sample analysis, just a single paragraph. Presence uncertain. Restraints appear to have been cut from within. On the night of his disappearance, phone records show he texted his colleague at 2:47 a.m. I heard knocking under my floor. There are no further messages. When police entered his home the next morning, they found deep gouges in the wood beneath his living room rug. The sound engineer overlays the evidence footage with the coroner's final voicemail, nothing but silence, followed by 3 dull knocks, evenly spaced, echoing like something striking from beneath. The journalist's voice shakes for the first time. He wasn't superstitious. He didn't believe in Evelyn, or curses, or anything that couldn't be measured. But he did believe in what sound meant. He told colleagues he planned to record the noise if it happened again. When investigators examined his home computer, they found a single file on the desktop. ***retie. Me. WAV***. The clip lasts 22 seconds. It begins with static, then the faint hum of the coroner breathing. A whisper surfaces beneath the noise, indistinct, wet, like air moving through a narrow space. At the 15-second mark comes the knock again, but closer, as though the floorboards themselves were hollow. The file ends abruptly with the sound of the microphone hitting the ground. The camera pans over his empty office, papers scattered, a wall clock frozen at 2:49. The narrator speaks faster now, the tone verging on panic, as the lines between evidence and haunting blur. Asterisk. We tried to replicate the sound. Asterisk, he says. Asterisk. Nothing matched. Not pipes, not settling wood, not any known frequency. But when the waveform was slowed and reversed, a pattern appeared: 3 beats, a pause, 3 more. The same rhythm from the Holt tape, the same from the Ridge. Asterisk. The segment ends on the final voicemail. A click, a breath, then his voice, distant, trembling. Asterisk. She's under the house. Asterisk. The screen cuts to black before the knock comes again. The road to Mill Hollow is narrow and half forgotten, winding through overgrowth that swallows the old fence posts whole. The camera jostles as the field team's truck crawls down the path, headlights cutting through a green haze of kudzu and mist. The journalist narrates in a tone that feels like confession. Asterisk. Mill Hollow was the last place Evelyn Crane lived before her arrest in 1911. The county map lists it as abandoned farmland, but the locals say her house still stands, or what's left of it does. They call it the house that won't fall. Asterisk? When the camera pans to the clearing, the house comes into view. A skeleton of wood and stone, its roof half caved, its windows nothing but empty sockets. Vines crawl through the frame like veins. The team approaches with flashlights, and every step crunches over glass, nails, and old bone. Inside, the air is heavy, sweet with rot. The light catches carvings on the interior walls, hundreds of them. Some are crude links, chain loops drawn over and over until the wood has splintered. Others are names, etched so deep they've bled into one another. The journalist reads them aloud, his voice trembling. Asterisk. Mary, Ruth, Thomas, asterisk. He stops on the last one, half finished, asterisk, Rhett, asterisk. The beam of his flashlight holds there. Asterisk. It's like she ran out of time before she could finish the word. Asterisk. The sound engineer sets down a recorder on the hearth. The playback begins quietly, just the shuffle of boots, the creak of the old structure shifting. Then, almost below hearing, a whisper crawls up from the floorboards. It's not words at first, only the shape of breath forming intent. When the recording is slowed, the phrase becomes clear. Asterisk, retie me. Asterisk. The journalist's narration falters. Asterisk. The whisper didn't come from any of us. Asterisk, he says, the film now cutting between the room's corners as the flashlight pans across the carvings. Some of the chain symbols have been burned into the walls, others scratched into plaster as though by nails, not tools. The deeper they look, the more they find the same unfinished mark. Asterisk, Rhett, asterisk repeated in every room. The historian accompanying the crew suggests the carvings may have been part of a folk ritual binding words meant to hold restless spirits. But the journalist's tone shifts colder, detached. Asterisk. If this was a ritual, it was one she wrote for herself. The chains aren't drawn to trap, they're drawn to remember. Asterisk. When the team sets up night cameras, the footage captures something they can't explain. At 3:03 a.m., one wall appears to shimmer as if light were passing beneath the wood. The microphone records faint, knocking 3 beats, a pause, 3 more, then silence. In the last seconds before the batteries die, the word Rhett seems to deepen in the grain of the wall, its edges darker, wet-looking, as though freshly carved. The next morning, when the team returns, the word is gone. The wall where it had been marked is bare, the wood smoother than before, almost polished. The journalist ends the segment quietly, his voice no longer trying to reason with what he's seen. Asterisk. There's something about this house that doesn't remember being abandoned. Something that wants to finish what was started. Asterisk. The camera lingers on the doorway as the wind moves through the hollow, carrying a sound that could be the sigh of the forest or the faint rattle of a chain tightening far beneath the floor. The camera opens on a sterile laboratory, fluorescent lights humming above rows of glass vials labeled with numbers instead of names. The journalist's voice cuts through the hum. Quieter now, careful. Asterisk. For over a century, Evelyn Crane existed only in rumor and record fragments, her name appearing in trial transcripts, then vanishing from census rolls. But a recent DNA analysis may suggest something stranger than myth. It suggests survival. Asterisk. The footage shifts to a forensic genealogist. Asterisk. Asterisk, doctor. Irene Maddox, speaking from behind a monitor. She clicks through a chart of mitochondrial DNA comparisons. Colored lines connect living participants to long-dead markers, each thread weaving back toward Carter County. Asterisk. We ran a voluntary test panel of locals interviewed for this documentary. Asterisk, she says. Asterisk. One result stood out immediately. Asterisk. The chart highlights a single sample, glowing faintly on screen. The name is redacted. Asterisk. Her maternal lineage matched with partial DNA, extracted from bone fragments found in the 1911 coffin. The statistical probability of coincidence, asterisk Maddox continues, asterisk is less than 1 in a million, asterisk. The scene cuts to a woman seated by a window, her face turned from the camera. She has agreed to speak on the condition of anonymity. Her voice trembles, but it isn't fear, it's recognition. Asterisk. I always knew something was wrong with the stories, asterisk, she says. Asterisk. My grandmother used to whisper about a woman they buried twice. She said the family wasn't supposed to talk about her because they took the name off the books. Asterisk. The narrator explains that the 1920 U.S. Census for Carter County lists no one with the surname Crane, though property records prove that the family still owned land there until 1932. Asterisk. Her bloodline was erased on paper but not in the ground. Asterisk, he says. Dr. Maddox appears again, scrolling through digitized county records. Asterisk. This was deliberate. Asterisk, she says. Asterisk. There's evidence the courthouse clerks removed references to the family by hand, entire pages torn from ledgers, inked over names in baptismal registries. Someone wanted Evelyn forgotten, not feared. Asterisk. The discovery reframes the entire narrative. What if the chains were not punishment for witchcraft, but protection from what the town itself had done? The journalist's tone changes, less the cold chronicler of haunting, more the voice of someone realizing he's been documenting an execution disguised as folklore. Asterisk. Maybe Evelyn wasn't cursed, asterisk, he says softly. Asterisk. Maybe she was silenced, and the haunting is just memory, refusing to stay buried. Asterisk. The anonymous descendant reaches into a small box on her lap and produces a folded photograph. It's black and white, edges frayed, showing a woman who could be Evelyn or could be her mirror. The resemblance is undeniable. Asterisk. Sometimes, asterisk, the woman says, asterisk. When the static comes on late at night, I feel like she's trying to talk through me. Like she never left, just changed names. Asterisk. The film closes on the genealogical map again, the glowing thread extending not just backward into history but forward, branching toward the present. The journalist's final words are almost a whisper. Blood remembers, paper forgets. Maybe that's why she was never at rest. The story didn't die, it inherited itself. Asterisk. The screen fades to the faint sound of a chain dragging through dirt, slow and steady, like something finally following its own name home. The scene opens beneath a low gray sky. Rain drizzles against the camera lens as county workers move slowly across the ridge, their boots sinking into the mud. The tone of the film has changed. There's no thrill of discovery now, only fatigue, as though everyone involved understands they are closing something that shouldn't have been opened. The journalist's voice, weary and subdued, begins over the image of a backhoe idling beside a rectangular pit. Asterisk. On March 8, 2024, Carter County conducted a supervised reburial of the remains believed to be those of Evelyn Crane. For the first time, federal oversight was mandated to ensure the process would not be repeated. Asterisk. The camera pans to a small crowd standing under black umbrellas. There are county officials, 2 federal observers, and a single pastor from Mount Olive Church. Their faces are pale, strained, illuminated by the occasional flash of lightning over the ridge. Every sound is amplified by the rain, the clank of tools, the metallic rattle of the chain being unspooled from a crate. A microphone left open near the grave picks up fragments of speech, the kind of low murmuring people use when they're afraid to say something aloud. Asterisk. Make it tight this time. Asterisk, one worker mutters. Asterisk. Don't let it breathe. Asterisk. The documentary cuts to close-up shots of the coffin. A heavy steel container lined with cold gray plating, its surface scarred by weather. Inside lie bone fragments, soil, and the remnants of decayed fabric. The coroner's report notes that several links of rusted chain believed to be original were placed inside the coffin before sealing. The new chain, gleaming silver, is looped 3 times around the body of the box before being bolted to a brace within the pit. The metallic clangs echo through the valley, rhythmic, deliberate. The pastor begins to pray, his voice trembling. The microphone captures only pieces of the words. Asterisk, bind not her soul, rest in the earth, forgive what we feared. Asterisk. Then another sound joins the faint, uneven sobbing of a woman standing apart from the others. When the camera pans toward her, she covers her face, refusing to speak. The journalist's narration lowers almost to a whisper. Asterisk. She did not give her name, but records later identified her as the last known descendant of Evelyn Crane. Asterisk. As the workers begin welding the coffin shut, sparks flare against the gray sky. The camera lingers on the seam where metal meets metal, the heat warping the air. The welder's torch hisses, drowning out the prayer. For a brief moment, the audio glitches, an unnatural distortion cuts through the static, a burst of sound like breath drawn through a long, narrow space. When slowed in post-production, it reveals 3 distinct knocks, faint but undeniable. When the process ends, the coffin is lowered into the ground, the chains rattling one last time before the soil muffles them. The narrator speaks with finality that doesn't sound certain. Asterisk. The county called it closure. They called it containment. But even sealed in steel, even welded shut, her name remains on the wind here. It's in the static, in the soil, in every map that keeps shifting its lines. Asterisk. The final shot holds steady on the new grave, no headstone, no marker, just fresh earth darkened by rain. For a long moment, the microphone records nothing but the steady drip of water, and then, too faint for certainty, a woman's voice whispers through the static. Asterisk. Retie me. Asterisk. The screen fades to black. The documentary opens in silence, save for the hum of a projector. A series of satellite images flickers across a darkened screen, Carter County rendered in shades of gray and green, the hills appearing almost skeletal under thermal light. The journalist speaks softly, his tone hushed, almost reverent. Asterisk. In July of 2024, researchers at the National Geospatial Survey noticed an anomaly in the topography of eastern Kentucky, an unregistered circular depression spanning nearly 9 miles across Carter County. What looked at first like a coincidence of erosion revealed itself to be something else entirely. Asterisk. The footage zooms in, the image sharpening to show a chain of faint, concentric ridges looping across fields, forests, and riverbeds. Each curve connects to another, forming what can only be described as an immense chain link pattern etched not in metal, but in the land itself. When overlaid with historical maps, the pattern aligns perfectly with every site tied to Evelyn Crane. The grave, the church, the limestone wall, the ridge, and even Mill Hollow. The narrator's voice trembles slightly as he continues. Asterisk. The earth itself has taken the shape of what they feared most. A geologist, Dr. Harper Sloan, appears in the next shot, seated before the glowing image of the pattern. She leans forward, her hands clasped tightly. Asterisk. We measured it 3 times. Asterisk, she says. Asterisk. It's not natural. The soil composition changes precisely along the ridges, as though the land was heated, reshaped, then cooled. The anomaly runs deeper than any geological layer should shift on its own. Asterisk? When the documentary overlays the satellite imagery with elevation data, the pattern grows even clearer, each link casting a faint shadow where the terrain dips unnaturally. The narrator explains that attempts to capture the same images now fail. Modern satellites show only static in that portion of the map, a corruption in the digital file itself. Asterisk. It's as if the land rejects being photographed. Asterisk, he says. Locals interviewed for the segment speak with that same resigned tone that Carter County voices always carry, the kind that sounds like prayer and exhaustion at once. Asterisk. We've seen lights moving in circles at night, asterisk, says one farmer. Asterisk. They're not planes. They move too slow, like something dragging under the sky. Asterisk, another woman adds. Asterisk. You can feel it when the wind shifts like the air's tightening around us. Asterisk. The film returns to the satellite composite one last time, zooming out until the entire county fills the frame. The pattern shimmers faintly, as if caught between the layers of the atmosphere and the soil. The sound engineer isolates a low-frequency vibration hidden in the satellite data, a rhythm too deliberate to be noise. It beats in triplets, 3 pulses, a pause, 3 again. The narrator's voice lowers almost to a whisper. Asterisk. They thought the chains would bind her to the grave. But maybe it was the world that bound itself to her, every prayer, every weld, every whispered fear pressing down until the land took shape around it. She doesn't need to rise. The earth already remembers. Asterisk. As the film closes, the satellite image fades into black, but the pattern lingers faintly, glowing like embers in the dark. The final line appears on screen, white against the void. Asterisk. Memory doesn't die. It changes form. Asterisk. A soft metallic rattle plays beneath the credits, distant, endless, like the turning of a chain across the sky. The camera opens on a sky, the color of pewter. The ridge stretches out beneath it, quiet and windless, though the cicadas hum like a low electric current through the trees. The journalist's footsteps crunch softly over the gravel path as he climbs the hill one last time. The camera shakes a little, unsteady, as if even the land beneath it resists being filmed again. Asterisk. It's been 6 months since the reburial. Asterisk, his voice says, weary, measured, almost breaking. Asterisk. They said the ground would settle this time. They said it was finished. Asterisk. The microphone catches the rustle of leaves, the rasp of wind through weeds. The grave, when it comes into view, looks unremarkable. No headstone, no marker, just a square of earth slightly darker than the rest. The journalist kneels, brushing his hand across the dirt. The audio flutters with interference, like the recorder itself can't decide whether to keep working. For a moment, there's nothing but air, and then beneath it a sound, faint and impossibly soft. A hum. It drifts low and tuneless at first, then slowly shapes itself into a melody recognizable to anyone who's watched this far. Asterisk. Shall we gather at the river? Asterisk. Only now it runs backward, each note folding in on itself like breath being drawn back into the lungs. The journalist doesn't speak at first. The image of him kneeling remains still, his fingers pressed to the soil as if trying to locate the vibration. Finally, he whispers, asterisk. You can feel it. Not sound exactly. more like the air remembering. Asterisk. The camera pans across the ridge trees swaying, though there's no visible wind, grass flattening in subtle circles. The cicadas fall silent all at once. The hum grows louder, not distant, but close, as though coming from inside the microphone, inside the film itself. The narrator resumes, his voice caught between disbelief and awe. Asterisk. We chained her coffin so she couldn't return. We welded it shut, sealed it in steel, buried it twice. But maybe she never needed to come back. Maybe she never left. Asterisk. The image begins to distort, horizontal lines streaking across the frame, as though the documentary reel itself is unraveling. The hum becomes a voice, low and layered, not words, but rhythm. 3 tones, a pause, 3 again. Lightning flashes in the distance. For a moment, the ridge is white with light, and something just at the edge of the grave seems to shimmer, the outline of a figure standing where the soil still settles unevenly. Then the image collapses into static. The sound continues, faint but constant. The journalist speaks one last time, and his words are steady now, resigned. Asterisk. They chained her coffin so she couldn't return, but they never asked where she went. Asterisk. The frame fades to black, the hum stretching into the darkness until it becomes indistinguishable from the wind, or from breathing, or from the soft, endless sound of a lullaby the earth itself has learned to sing.